What's up guys, it's Noah from Stage 3 Motorsports here, and today I'm going to be bringing you a review on this Elka 2.5 suspension for the F150. So this kit, just talking in terms of basic specs, is pretty similar to a lot of other 2.5 kits on the market, just in general construction. Basically you get a front coilover, and a 2.5 is referring to the diameter of the shock within that coilover, and then it's got a remote reservoir attached to that. Both are built with aluminum bodies to help kind of vent heat out of them. You've got some adjustable coil springs on top of that to determine where you want your ride height to sit. And then the rear has a reservoir as well, but obviously there's no spring there and they're not going to change ride height. So you're just changing the front of the vehicle to pretty much level it. And you'd have to add a block to the rear like we did if you wanted the rear end to come up. So our front's sitting at over 2 inches. We're probably around 2 1/4 with a 2-inch rear block in the back as well. So it does have a tiny bit of rake, but the stance looks really good on it. That also gives us plenty of room inside to run a 33-inch tire, which we've had on here with some other suspension kits because we've tested a lot of different systems on this truck. But overall, the stance and the look is perfect. Like I said, the construction of this system is really solid. We haven't had any breaks or leaks or anything wrong with the system from off-roading it or daily driving it, using it on the street. No issues there, which has been really good. First thing I want to talk about though is actually the off-road performance of this system. And a lot of times there's kind of some room for interpretation on what people think is good or bad. Some people really like a stiffer suspension. Some people like it a little bit more on the soft side. I generally prefer suspension that's a little bit softer and soaks up the bumps a little nicer, whereas some of the other guys that I work with do like a little bit stiffer suspension, like a lot of Icon systems. Now, I would say that just right off the bat, this Elka feels pretty comparable to a Fox or an Icon kit in the overall build quality and just the nice ride on the street. It's very planted, very controlled. It didn't feel like we compromised on-road comfort when we put this on. Now, off-road, it is a little bit softer than a lot of the Icon systems, and even right now, I'm hitting kind of some washboardy sections outside of Sedona. It's a little rocky, a little bit rutted, nothing too wild. A lot of this is like forest service road that you guys probably spend a good majority of your time on when you're going out camping or hunting. On most roads like this, you can really comfortably cruise at 20 to 30 miles an hour and keep some speed up and feel like you've got good planted traction in the dirt. It's actually a little bit muddy out here right now too, and with all that kind of clay and oily sort of soot that's in the dirt, it does slide a bit, but that's more of a tire thing than a suspension thing, and it still keeps the truck very controllable. Getting up into the higher speeds with this truck, when you're starting to touch 40 or 50, it still feels very controlled on the rough, forest road, washboard road kind of situations. Generally, you're not going to be able to hit those kind of speeds on really rocky off-road trails, so it's really not relevant there. But it does still handle some of the bigger bumps better. You can, almost get the truck airing out a little bit to where it's getting close to jumping, or you're, coming over bigger whoops, and it'll settle in really nicely. It does seem like when you hit something unexpected though, or you catch a rut that you weren't planning on at higher speeds, it doesn't feel quite as forgiving as the Icons do. A lot of times those give you the sense that you can almost be indestructible and slam into things without consequence. These do remind you that you still maybe need to slow down or be a little more cautious when you hit things at that kind of speed. But like I said, that sort of comes with having a softer ride as well. So generally they feel a little bit more supple, but you maybe can't punish them quite as bad. Speaking in terms of the rear shocks now, they're definitely a little bit more planted than the really soft factory shocks that come on these trucks. That's one of those things that a lot of people will change right off the bat with these F150s, is just getting the factory rear shocks out of the way and getting something else in there that keeps the bed from shimmying and dancing all over the place, and really works better not only for just off-roading, but even on street driving it feels a little bit nicer. And if you're hauling or towing anything, having that bit of extra control is really good. And out here off-road, they perform the same. Having the external reservoirs both on the front and the back obviously helps with increasing that oil capacity. You get a little bit more travel because there's more room for the pistons to actually move. There's a lot less fade involved when you're hitting constant, just rigorous bumps and rocks. It definitely feels good, so I don't really have any complaints. The rear is a pretty simple upgrade, and generally I think a lot of rear shocks on the market aren't going to leave people upset or complaining about the way they ride or perform. You really can only go up from factory in that case, but Elka did a good job with it. Now, talking about slow trail driving and hitting the really rocky and technical stuff, The big advantage there with a suspension system like this is you will have a pretty good ride, and with this being a little softer, I think it keeps you from getting beat around too bad in the cab. But really the main thing is that you're able to bring the truck up and get a little bit of extra clearance. So in those off-road situations with something like this, we can add 2 to 2.5 inches up front, fit a little bit bigger tire, you get a little bit better approach angle, and that's really just going to increase the trail capability of the truck exponentially as you continue to expand it from there. This truck has really felt capable on the trails with this setup. Like I said, this sits at a pretty similar height to some of the other suspension kits we've had. We went a little bit higher with going over 2 inches on it. Some of them we set right at 2. Still running the 33-inch KM3 tires. It gets around just fine over the really rocky stuff. It digs into the mud and plows through no issues. And we've been really happy with how controllable it is in the really technical off-road terrain. So I mentioned on-road performance a little bit earlier in the review as I was driving, but I wanted to come back to it here at the end and just discuss it a little bit more. For those of you guys that are running a stock vehicle and have never had any sort of lift or suspension upgrade on it, you're going to be pretty used to soft suspension, and so the Elkas will be a little bit stiffer than what you've probably been accustomed to on the street. But that being said, it's by no means going to break your back. These things are still very comfortable, they're very controlled on the road, and if anything, the little bit of firmness there is nice over some of the overly stock soft suspension, especially in the back of the truck. And if you're somebody who's used to driving lifted vehicles or has had bigger, 4-inch, 6-inch lifts, some stiffer suspension setups, something like this may actually be a little bit more comfortable than what you're used to, just because it is still pretty close to stock and that firmness really isn't extreme. So it does handle very much like a normal regular stock F150, and I really do like that about this system. It doesn't give the impression that you're driving a vehicle that's only off-road capable or that it's unsafe on the street. So guys, this is going to be a wrap on our review of the Elka suspension system. There are actually 2 different kits available, so if you're interested in checking these out, we'll put the links down below. There is a 2 to 3 inch kit, which is what we have on this truck, and there's also a 0 to 2 inch if you want something that's a little bit lower and doesn't have quite the same ride height. But do keep in mind that with the kit we have here for 2 to 3 inches, you will need an upper control arm to go with that so that you can get it aligned properly and you're not going to have issues with the suspension binding up. As usual guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.